Hello, I'm Allan Lee. Welcome to NZONE Focus and our series of interviews with political party leaders as we head into next month's general election. Well, my guest this week is the co-leader of the Maori Party, Dr. Pita Sharples. Dr. Sharples, kia ora, thank you for joining us. At the last election, it was really interesting because a lot of the vote in the Maori seats was split, with the Labour Party taking the party vote and you taking the electorate vote. Were they trying to tell you something? What was the story there?
No, I don't think it's so much telling us something. It's more that many of our people who have traditionally voted Labour, they're finding it hard to make the break. They think they're voting strategically to put in Labour instead of National, but put the Maori candidate in. So we've got in both times on our candidacy rather than upon the party vote.
Do you think then that since there obviously is this long-term association between Maori and Labour, what was the reaction when you've been working with National so closely? Do you think that was uncomfortable for some of your voters?
Oh, very much so. In fact, the Hone Hara with the Split sang that song and said we're just hanging around the Prime Minister and National, and that's all we care about. The reality is we were in government and you had to be at the table, otherwise you're not doing anything, you know. And we were lucky to have 2 ministerials, myself and Tariana, there. But no, that's so people thought, well, maybe they shouldn't be close to National. But I think it's changed now. I think it's more people think both those main parties are quite similar. And it's interesting, in one of the recent polls, National got a higher vote than Mana in one incidence and so on.
So it's worked for you then to be.
Oh, it has to work for us, because if you're not at the table, you're throwing stones, and while you're making a lot of noise, you're not achieving a thing. Because we found that out in our first term, we threw stones for 3 years on the crossbenchers, and while we got a lot of credibility, it didn't change much. But once we're in government, well, we've had Maori economic success, we've had literacy success, we've had constitutional success. You have to be in the government if you want to make change. And that's what you go for. The rules are who gets the highest vote, gets the bill passed, and National call it, or whoever's in government, Labour or National. I mean, we'd sit comfortably with any government because we have our own point of reference, which is Maori. And if we were invited in a Labour government to be in cabinet, then again we'd be staunch to Maori things, as we have been with National. So the only thing we've been had to vote with National upon is confidence and supply, issues of money. And it's interesting, we have voted against our lead party, National, more than Labour. So the Labour formal opposition have supported National government more than the Maori Party have, even although we have this relationship. And National understand that.
You mentioned Hone Harawere and the split with the Mana Party.
Yes.
Is that going to weaken you when you come into the election?
It's already done that. It's weakened us terribly. And part of it is this proliferation of untruths that he's been saying about our competency and what we've achieved. You know, we have achieved $612 million for Maori alone, and education initiatives, whānau ora initiatives, and those kind of initiatives. And, you know, that's no mean achievement at a time when there's a recession. We did it during that time. And even now, at this last budget, which is pretty hard, we've managed to get some money for literacy in Decile 1, 2, 3, all Decile 1, 2, 3 in schools in New Zealand and stuff like that. So it's been hard, but that's the way it goes. So he and others have said that we're too close to the government, and that has caused us to lose a lot of support. But the sad thing is, what Hone and others in his party are doing is they're leading the victim concept. And so a lot of our people who are in a bad way at this time, you know, many of our people are quite poor. And many of them are in the lower ranks of socioeconomic situations. So it's really easy to follow someone who says, we are being deprived, we need this and we need that, and so on. And that's why it has done damage to us who are actually doing something about it. For example, when the recession hit, I put some money out for gardens. I thought this is a good way, people in poor rural situations and so on could plant a garden, and at least there would be some food coming in. 500 gardens I funded. And we're going to reopen that program because I think we're not out of the woods yet, and fund more gardens for families to cluster. So, you know, things like that.
On a personal note, it must have been quite saddening for you.
It was very saddening. It was very stressful, especially on my colleagues. Some of my colleagues really found it really tough. But you see, it's not about all Maoris working together, because look at the tribes. You know, I've been a tribal chairman for 8 years at one stage, and it's really difficult. And you just look at the claims and the difficulty the different tribes have with working together and so on. Because of the situation they're put in, really. Well, the same thing is with Parliament. So it's very difficult if you can't be in the same tent with your philosophy and your thinking, then you're not going to do any good in Parliament.
Let's talk about some of the issues that I know our audience is particularly concerned about. A lot of research has gone into the family unit and seems to show that the traditional family unit of mum and dad and kids, I guess in many ways...
Your traditional family, not ours.
Indeed. Yeah. But then also that the whole whānau concept, again, is research shows that whānau is a very strong concept. And yet it seems to be weakened. What can we do to support family and whānau?
Well, I think the Māori Party is the one party that's done a lot to do that by creating the whānau order program. And this is a way of strengthening whānau, letting them take their own lives in their own hands and make their own decisions, instead of having 4 cars parked up in their driveway offering different services to them. And that's why I think whānau order may be a way New Zealand as a whole can change in the delivery of its social services. I believe it could spread across the world.
The Bible specifically tells us to look after our most vulnerable people, the widows and orphans. Are we doing that correctly? Do you think as a nation we're looking after our widows and orphans, that the people who are least able to look after themselves?
We believe you should look after the whole family as a unit, not discriminate between them. But, you know, that kōrero about that Minister Power said in his speech, what on earth possessed us to think that after a day's work you can go home and beat up somebody you love? And that's something we have to come to terms with in our country. And a lot of us involved in those anti-family violence are organisations and groups. And on one hand, we're getting less complaints, but I don't know whether we're winning at all. Somehow that psyche has come into New Zealand, and it's got to be eliminated. So I think that's one danger that we should all look to work towards. But in terms of our most vulnerable, that is a Māori expression, te pani me te rawakore. Those who are vulnerable, we have to really support them. And I don't think we do that very well. I think we do with the olds better than we do with the children and babies. And somehow, if we can strengthen the whānau group, then it would naturally flow down to the babies.
We'll take a brief break there, then we'll come back and chat some more. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to NZONE Focus, our interview with Dr. Pita Sharples, the co-leader of the Maori Party. Before the break, we were talking about whānau and family, and we touched on family violence. Alcohol and drugs seems to be a huge issue, particularly the binge drinking culture. Has the legislation that's gone through on liquor reform, is it going to achieve anything?
No, it's too late. We wanted heavier restrictions. Because we know it's at the cause of many of the Maori people who are in prison. We're overrepresented in prison. Often it's alcohol-related instances that cause that. So we wanted more severe measures taken. Just as we've led the campaign against cigarette smoking, and we thought that was a bit light as well. So, yeah, and drugs is something that we've got to come down on heavy, whether we like it or not, because methamphetamine is one of the worst things that's hit New Zealand society. It's split families completely. And so, yeah, all those things we have to work on.
Let's talk about young people. A desperate shortage of jobs, Maori and Pākehā young people. What's the answer? Is there an answer?
Well, you know, I always look at, there's short-term things we can do, and I guess we've got to do that. That's the kōrero right now, te pani me te rawa kore. The people who are vulnerable and disadvantaged, and a lot of those are youth, and a lot of those are Maori youth. And I just want to explain this. We can take short measures, and we have done so, and I believe my garden helped them over that period. And we've concentrated on trade training and started some projects. We were the first to launch a number of trade training projects to get that back and get people into work. And cadetships and things like this were set up, and we're going to pursue that this time. But the reality is, the median wage is a line over here for New Zealand, but the median Maori wage is down here. Until there's only one line, you're going to have this discrepancy. So in the recessions of the 30s, Maori were first off, last back on work. 80s, the same, and the recent recession, it's exactly the same. So in this recent recession, suddenly our unemployment went up to 6.5 for the country, 16% for Maori, and a lot of those were youth. So, you know, until we have that one line where we all get put off equally and all put back on, it's going to be the same. So I'm saying we have to invest in education and support the young people coming through. So within a generation, you can eliminate that. We have over 500 Maori doctors now, PhDs. So, you know, we've got people in the excellence scientific area and so on. But it's bringing that other group through so all the children have a chance. I think that is really what we have to do. We have to take a long-term look at this thing. So while we do our best to cater for now and bring in ad hoc solutions, at the end of the day, the real solution is education at the grassroots and bring them through.
Because I know this is your, I mean, this is your background.
Oh, it is, so. Yes. But, you know, it happens to be the right one. Happens to be true.
How's it, the kohanga reo, how has that worked out? Has that produced good results for Maori? It's
produced very good results. It has faltered in its delivery because there's two issues being disputed amongst Maori at the moment about the kohanga reo, and one is its delivery system of its resources and its programs and the number of able tutors to fulfill it. And so there is a decline in the numbers, and the Trust Board is at differences with parts of the iwi, and that has to be sorted out to do that. The other thing that kohanga faces is that it's being treated like an early childhood centre, sometimes like a kindergarten, sometimes like a drop-in centre, you know, all those sort of things, when it's actually a kohanga, something quite different, something culturally different. Kura kaupapa Māori are schools, but they are schools called Kura kaupapa Māori, schools with a Māori philosophy, if you like. And that has been legislated for. They have their own legislation of the Education Act, recognises Kura kaupapa Māori Section 165, and so on. So kohanga needs that, so that when the funding is decided, the training programs are decided, they are training programs for kohanga and not for anything else, and they have their own scale. So those are two of the hurdles that have interrupted the efficient delivery of kohanga reo services. As a result, a mainstream Ministry of Education alternative has flourished a little. So there are still children in the reo, yes.
What about national standards? That's something of a hot potato. Do you support the idea of national standards in schools?
It's irrelevant whether I support them. I'm the Associate Minister of Education, and it's law. And schools and teachers are being told that this is the law and you must implement them.
You must be disappointed then, because there seems to be so much resistance to the idea of national standards. From
well, you know, if you think back, that is the very reason why we created Kura Kaupapa Māori. We went outside the system to create our own type of school with its own character and its own measurement. And ERO came along to examine us. We gave them a very good welcome and a very good afternoon tea and said, goodbye. You're not examining us because you don't have the tools. Because we are a kaupapa Māori kura and you are a mainstream school, so-and-so. And so we've kept the faith with our things. So in a way that's similar to what schools are saying now. And a lot of the Māori kura are having difficulty accepting the national standards, and so are mainstream schools, for a whole lot of reasons. And you can argue both sides, really. But the reality is one is law and the other one is outside the law. But schools will do what they believe best for their children.
The figures, and we mentioned this briefly earlier on, the figures seem to show a growing gap between rich and poor in New Zealand, and that's across the board. It's not just Māori, it's everybody. Mm. Do you think that the policies that have been put in place over the last 3 years, have they made that gap bigger or smaller? Because it feels like it's got bigger.
It's partly the policies, but it's not. I blame something different. I blame the boom years 6 years ago, when the new economic rich, the new business people, the smart business people, and so on. I mean, you can see it in these traditional schools. The Board of Governors have changed. They're no longer the farmers. They're no longer the old gentry of the city and stuff. They are people who have succeeded as CEOs and so in business and so on. And that's what's happened. There's been an explosion in terms of industry and in the commercial world. And suddenly there is this sort of, not like quick fix, but something like that, where you got to get in and get the buck and so on. And I think it's changed our culture a lot. And we got fixed on that sort of fast track stuff. And I think that's done a lot to progress people hunting the dollar and causing or exacerbating the gap between the haves and have-nots.
I was talking to a clergyman, funnily enough, the other day, who said that as voters, we're tending to vote for the person who can give us the most money rather than the person who's going to do the most good.
Exactly, and I think that's what any politician would admit is their dilemma. Have they got the courage to risk losing votes by saying what they really want and what really should be? Or do they decide, hell, we've got nothing for the olds, let's go for a lower pension age, or something like that, as a possibility, or let's increase their magic card so they can get extra rides to somewhere, or doctor, or something like this. And I don't think that's right. And I'll tell you straight, because I'm of that age, and we got 3% loans. We got, as young people, we got paid to go to university, whereas now they owe thousands to get a degree. We got actually a salary to go there, or a wage, or some scholarship or something in our days. And we've had it easy peasy. We got homes for $9,000 plus the section, all that kind of thing. And now we're many, because we're getting older and more people are getting older, and we're suddenly moaning about this and that and this and that. And I don't think we really deserve that. I think we just sort of should fit in with our family and not be olds out on their own fighting. I think they should stay with their family and be part of looking to bring their grandchildren through and giving them the benefits of their life. We've had ours. We've had a good go. I've still got a bit left. But you know what I mean, no? We start winding down on your benefits so that you can create benefits for youth and children and bring them through as our leaders for tomorrow.
As far as MMP is concerned,
yes,
because we'll be voting on MMP in a referendum in the election, would you go with keeping MMP, or do you want to see some changes?
I'd go for MMP, and I think New Zealand would be so stupid to throw it out. You know, it's pretty new, really. And we're just seeing the different forms it can take, and there's no doubt that it allows different voices to the table. And even the major parties would probably support that, the MPs, I don't know. But I would think some of them have made good noises about it. But first past the post polarizes everybody, left or right, and there's a two-way battle, whereas MMP has allowed all the different voices to come in and have a say. And that's why we're able to say we're in Parliament. We don't represent the left, we don't represent the right, we represent Maori. Greens represent green, and so on, without being left or right. And that's how it should be, that people can go in there with their own wheelbarrow and say, this is what I stand for, and so on. And by standing for your own cause, you're taking New Zealand forward. It's not about division, but by having the different groups represented, it actually moves the whole country forward.
MMP means, of course, coalitions. Is there anyone...
Yes.
I was going to say, is there anyone that you would work with, but actually it's more interesting to ask, is there anyone you wouldn't work with?
Well, let me say this. We'll work with people who want to work with us. You know, we're not hunting so much. I mean, obviously, you've got to be at the table. If you can be at the table and you deserve to be at the table, then be at the table and make decisions, make laws, and make a difference, and get access to funding for good projects and things like this. But in terms of us, we would work with, I mean, it doesn't matter who's the government. If they invited us in, we would probably be okay. Yeah.
It's always fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much for your
Kia ora.
time. Thank you. And that brings this programme to a close. We look forward to seeing you again next week when I'll be talking to ACT leader Dr. Don Brash. We'll see you then.